session where we have already taken on and received lots of questions from job seekers out there who have emailed them through, and we're going to run through those. So this session is a little bit different to our other ones. We simply want to know, what are your questions? What are some of the things that you're struggling with when you're looking for work, whether it's resumes, interviews, just going through the process? Perhaps what are some of the questions that you've got that you haven't been able to ask anybody, or that you haven't found the answer to? Maybe what are the questions that you're a little bit embarrassed to ask? What are those things that you feel like you should know, but you haven't asked them yet because you're a little bit too embarrassed to? So I've had almost 20 questions sent to me via our socials, via email, and we're going to run through those today. Now, no matter where you're watching us today, you can also add questions. If you're watching us on one of our social channels, you can pop a question in. I've got a little tab on my screen here. The question will pop up. If you're watching us on one of your partner platforms too, you'll see that either next to the video or below, there's a space there where you can either type in a question that I can read out. You can do so anonymously, or you might even just type in a comment. Let me know what you're thinking as I go through today's questions. So we are coming to you completely live. Obviously, it is Friday morning, the 21st of August. I'm in regional Victoria. I'll be in Brisbane next week. Looking forward to getting out of Victoria in the middle of winter. But let's jump in. And I've categorized sort of the questions that I've been sent via email and through Messenger into sort of 5 or 6 categories. And I'm going to go through them sort of in groups, because that will help in many ways for it to flow on and make a lot of sense. So the first question is, James, I'm unemployed at the moment. How many jobs should I be applying for each week? This is a great question. This is a question that actually has a lot of layers to it. The reason I say that is, when you are unemployed, people feel often many different things. Some people feel highly motivated and they want to get out there as quick as they can, and they want to apply for as many jobs as possible. For other people, it's a very different experience. You might be really struggling with your mental health. You might be really struggling with your self-esteem. And if that is you, can I let you know you're not alone? We have a video on our platform called Looking After Your Mental Health When Looking for Work. And in my 20 plus years in recruitment, I've seen the most confident people lose their job or end their employment, and it changes who they are, because particularly for males, identity is tied up into employment. But back to the question, how many jobs should you be applying for per week? So I have a strong rule here that you need to protect your time. So I don't want you spending 8 hours a day at your desk applying for jobs. I don't want you picking up your phone every 10 minutes and just scrolling through Seek and seeing if there's any job alerts. I want you to structure your time, and so that you are having time where this is job application time and this is not job application time. And when it's not job application time, we're exercising, going for a walk, we're cooking, we're doing things that we enjoy. We're not just always scrolling on our phones. Now, each application that you put in needs to be tailored. You need to have read the advertisement and understood it. You need to have researched the company and made sure it's a place that you're going to work. You need to have looked up the key people in those organizations. You need to have customized your resume so that your resume is speaking specifically to the duties and the responsibilities that are in the advertisement. And you also need to have written a custom cover letter specifically stating why you are a great candidate for that role. So with all those things in mind, my recommendation is that you should be applying for a maximum of 2 jobs per day. 2 jobs per day. If you do that Monday to Friday, that is, hopefully you got the maths, 10 jobs per week. On the weekend, I don't want you applying for any jobs at all. Because over time, if you've been looking for work for a month, well, you've applied for 40 jobs. That is a lot of jobs. That is hard for you to keep up with. So spend your time when you're applying for jobs making sure you're only applying for jobs that you are really interested in. Work hard on those applications. Make no more than 2 applications a day. no more than 10 applications per week. So the second question, and again, I've grouped these together. Should I tailor my resume for every application, or just make a really good version and use that one all the time? Okay, every single job that you apply for is different. Now, you might say, but James, I'm only applying for customer service jobs. They're all doing customer service. And I understand what you're saying. But customer service is still different in every single role. There's different types of customers. You're representing different products and services. The organization is different. The systems are different. And the advertisement will describe different things. So my answer is yes. You must have a different resume and tailor it for every single job application. Again, we come back to reading the advertisement. What it says in the advertisement is what they're looking for. And in your resume or in your history of work, you cannot list every single thing that you have done in your employment. So you want to pick the key things from your background that best match the advertisement and tailor your resume to match that advertisement. Now, this doesn't mean that we need to go all the way back to the very start with our resume and start rewriting it from the beginning for every role. No, we won't. And over time, I would recommend that you save each resume that you use and you develop a little bit of a library. You might have 10 to 12 resumes, for example. And so when you see a job that you're interested in, which is similar to the last one, you might just be changing a couple of lines on your resume. You might just be highlighting some different aspects of what you did in that role because it is going to best support your application for that particular role. So yes, you need to tailor your resume for every single role. All right, just a reminder, pop any questions in. I can see we've got a few coming through. Question number 3, are online job boards worth it anymore, or should I focus elsewhere? Online job boards are definitely worth it. That's the main source where you can find advertisements. What I would always do, though, if I went to Seek or Indeed or one of the other job boards and I found an advertisement there that I'm interested in, before I apply, I will be going away and doing my research. I'll be going to that company's website. I'd be going to their careers page. If I saw the advertisement advertised on their careers page, I'd probably apply via their careers page. That would be my recommendation. But there's absolutely nothing wrong with using the job boards. Question number 4, and this is a goodie. This is a real good question. How do I get noticed when I have no direct experience in the field? I get this question a lot. I get this question from first-time job hunters who might be saying, I've never had a job. It's time for me to start looking for work. I get this question from people who want to change careers completely. They might say, I've worked in accounts for 25 years and I want to change careers. And so it is quite a challenge. There's quite a gap there that you need to cross to start working in a field where you have no direct experience. So the first thing that you need to make sure on your application is that the person reading your application is very, very clear that you are deliberately applying for this job. Why do I say that? I say that because from a recruiter's point of view, we can get hundreds of resumes for each vacancy. And we see and we know that it is quite easy to punch out lots of different applications. You could today go and apply for 50 jobs if you wanted. And so on the other end of that is a recruiter going, I've got 200 resumes here. I know that job seekers sometimes just throw their resume out and see who calls back. So if you are looking to make a deliberate move into that role, you need to be very, very clear. So how do we do that? We do that in 3 main ways. The first main way is we need to be really, really clear on our cover letter. We need to be clear in our cover letter that we are looking to make a change here. If you're in the accounts department or in an accounting role at the moment, and you want to move into, say, marketing, you need to say very, very clearly on your resume why you are applying for a marketing role. You need to show your enthusiasm for marketing. If you've been doing some study there, you need to mention it. You don't want to just the recruiter to assume that you are just another candidate applying for the marketing job. So firstly, in your cover letter, you need to be explicit and say, yes, I have worked in accounts, but I am passionate about moving into a marketing role. Here's why. Here's what I've already done in terms of showing my own level of interest or my own knowledge. And so you need to remove any shadow of a doubt. You need to remove any shadow of a doubt. If there is any shadow of a doubt, then the recruiter will simply move on from your application very, very quickly. Secondly is on your resume. So you need on your resume to be able to highlight any aspects of your work at all that relate to the new role. So again, if I said if you're working in the accounts department and you are applying for a role in the marketing department, you need to have a think about, was there anything that I did when I worked in accounts that I can relate to working in marketing? Was there anything at all that I did in accounts? So go back through and have a think. Have a look at the position description or the advertisement for the marketing role and think, in my role, did I do anything? Did I do anything in accounts that I can use as a bit of a stepping stone towards marketing? If you have started to study marketing, or if you have been involved in any projects that involve marketing, include those on your resumes as well. We are trying to build a case here with not a lot of evidence. I get that. We have not a lot of evidence here, but we are trying to build a case around why we want to move or should be considered to move from accounts to marketing. The third thing, and I actually, in all of my coaching for job seekers, I think this is the most powerful thing you can do. I think this can have the biggest difference on your application if you are brave enough. That is to pick up the phone and to call about the position. Now, there's a lot of reasons why people say, oh, that's not going to work. They might say it's really hard to find the phone number. Yes, it is. The phone number might not be advertised. You're correct. But if you can get through to speak to the right person, you are actually putting a lot more spotlight on your application. Again, for a marketing role, a recruiter could be sitting there with 100 to 200 applications to go through. However, if you call and you get through and you've got them on the phone, the recruiter is not looking at those 200 applications. They are now talking to you. So that call, though, needs to be very well planned, doesn't it? We can't just be making any old call and calling up and saying, oh, I'm interested about the job. We've got another episode on our Candidate Coach platform called How to Effectively Call a Recruiter About a Job. I really recommend you watch that episode. We tell you what you should say, we tell you how you should say it, and we tell you how you can prepare. Because if you prepare to make that call and you do get through to the right person, this is an opportunity for you to shine, and it can make a huge difference in the moment. All right, question number 5. What do I do if I keep getting rejected without getting any feedback? Yep, this is a tough one. I really feel your pain. I work with a lot of job seekers who have been unemployed for a long time, and it feels like it is just constant rejection, constant rejection, constant rejection. One of the things that I've certainly noticed with many job seekers who do find themselves in that place is they have become so worn down by the process of getting rejected that in some ways they've given up. While they continue to apply for roles, they're not putting in the level of effort that's requiring. And so instead of customizing the resume, instead of customizing the cover letter, instead of making the right calls on jobs, they're just almost sitting there in a bit of a daze, clicking, applying, and throwing the same resume at everything. You are far better to make 5 tailored, customized applications than to make 100 using the same resume. Because from those 5, you are more likely to get a better response. But if you are continuing and getting really worn down by the rejection, there are a couple of things you can do. First of all, I'd ask you to be perhaps realistic about the roles you're applying for. A lot of the time when candidates are getting rejected for a long time, we discover that perhaps their expectations around either the job they're looking for, the money that they're looking for, the hours that they're looking for, it's not realistic. It's not always available. And so you need to say, okay, if I've applied for 300 jobs over the last 4 months and I haven't been successful, I need to change. It needs to be me. I need to change my selection criteria. I need to change up my resume. I need to change the way I'm going about it. So if you're getting constant rejection, you need to make a change. Okay, the next question. We've got a couple of questions here that I've grouped around resumes. We already have discussed on some of them, but the question here is, what's the biggest mistake candidates normally make on resumes? The biggest mistake by far that candidates make on resumes is they make one resume and they use it for all their jobs. So as I've already said several times in this 15 minutes so far, you need to customize your resume for every job. Your resume is a fluid document. It is always changing. It is breathing. It is moving. It needs to be different for every single job. Do I need a cover letter in 2026? Absolutely, yes, you do. I started recruitment in 2005, and I remember in that first year reading an article that cover letters were dead, that resumes were dead, and that nobody reads them. Cover letters are not dead, like resumes are not dead. And if you think about it, when you're applying for a job, you can normally only submit two things: a resume and a cover letter. So why you not submit a cover letter, I really don't understand. You're sort of passing on an opportunity. Yes, it might not get read every single time, but what if someone's looking at your application and they go to look for a cover letter and there's not one there? Again, we've got lots of coaching on how to do it, create a great cover letter. And so I'd really recommend that you go and watch that episode. People think cover letters take a long time. People think they take a long time, but that's just because you don't understand the structure. Once you've structured a cover letter using our 4-paragraph structure, it becomes a lot easier. All right, next question. Should I include, how do I explain a gap in my employment history? You explain a gap in your employment history, you're not going to get asked to explain it till it's an interview. So if you've got a gap there for whatever reason, good, bad, or ugly, maybe it's you went on a long holiday. Maybe you were caring for a sick family member. Maybe you were on parental or maternity leave. You just explain it as it was in the interview. This is why I had that gap. You can get into a lot of trouble here if you're dishonest about the gaps on your resume, because if you're caught to be not truthful, then the interviewer will feel like they cannot trust you, and the rest of the time when you're in that application process, that the trust is broken. I have a criminal record. Should I include that on my resume? And if so, how? No, I wouldn't include it on your resume. I would, with criminal records, and again, we've got a series of coaching videos here, and if you don't know where they are, reach out to me directly. If you have a criminal record, don't write it on your resume. So we don't want to advertise, wave the flag, hey, I've got a criminal record. But you might be fully rehabilitated. That might be a long time ago. So we're not going to hide it, but we're not going to promote it either. You need to disclose your criminal record whenever you're asked. So if you're asked on the application form, you have to say, yes, I have one. If you're asked in interview, you need to say, yes, I have a criminal record. How you go about talking about it, though, will determine whether or not it impacts your application. Again, we've got a series of 3 coaching videos on how to go through those. Next question. What's the best way to answer the question, tell me a little bit about yourself? I find this really, really hard. I'm happy to answer questions about the work I've done, but I find it really awkward and uncomfortable when talking about myself. This is a really common situation. So thank you to the person who wrote that in. That is something that we get all the time. I start actually all of my interviews, whether it's a phone interview or it's a face-to-face interview or a video interview, with, hey, just to begin with, tell me a little bit about yourself. And this is a really important moment. It's the moment where I often first get to hear from you, the candidate. And so my spider senses are heightened. I want to see how you communicate here. The best thing you can do here is to create what we call an elevator pitch. You can Google how to create an elevator pitch. You can watch my video on how to create an elevator pitch. But if you create an elevator pitch and you practice it and you can roll it out, what it allows you to do is give a really great answer to the question. So I'm not going to go any further than that today, but if you can create an elevator pitch, then you will give a great answer to the question, tell me a bit about yourself. Or tell me about yourself. Next question. How do I talk about being fired or made redundant without it sounding negative? Okay, so we've got two questions here. Being fired or dismissed is often very, very different from being made redundant. A lot of the time, redundancy refers to the fact that that position is made redundant. So it's not you personally that's being made redundant. That position is basically being dissolved. That position no longer existed. And that's how you would describe it. Hey, I worked in the accounts team. We were a team of 8. The team was reduced in size down to 5. There were 3 people who were made redundant, and I was one of them. That's how you would describe it. You just be completely honest. If you've been terminated before, sacked, we would call it, or dismissed, again, you need to be honest here. But what you need to show in the way you talk about the situation is that you have learnt from the experience, that you have moved on. You don't want to sit there and say, well, I was terminated, but it was all my boss's fault because he was a really nasty person. And let me tell you all about him. Because then all the recruiter is going to remember is how you sort of banged on about how bad your boss was. In some ways, the most important thing and the best thing to do is just own it. Yeah, that was a job I worked in 6 years ago. I wasn't as committed as I should have been to my work at that time. I was dismissed because I was late so often. But since then, I've really learnt the importance of punctuality. And my most recent reference will definitely speak to that. So again, we be honest. We talk about it and we recognize the mistakes we made, but we also show we've moved beyond that and we've learnt. You need to practice these answers. If you've been dismissed from a job and you think it's going to come up, you need to practice how you are going to answer that question. Because while it's not great that you were dismissed, what's going to carry far more weight is how you talk about the fact that you were terminated from that job. What questions should I ask the interviewer? Okay, great question. At the end of every interview, it is likely that you're going to be asked, have you got any questions for me? I would recommend that you take along 6 questions. You write down on a piece of paper 6 questions, but you won't ask 6. You probably ask 3. 3 is probably the maximum. The reason you write down 6 is because some of the questions that you might have written down or might want to ask will be answered in the interview by the interviewer. So you might go, oh, the first 2 questions I was going to ask, you've already answered, so let me ask a couple of other ones. Write these questions down in advance. Prepare really good questions. Don't say, what are the hours? What's the salary? What's car parking like? Write down questions that show your level of interest in the job and the company. Now, I can't tell you what they are because they're going to be specific to each role and each company, but do your research here. Write down good questions. Write down questions that you think the interviewer is going to be impressed in. So if you're working in customer service, for example, in the contact center, you might say something like, I'm really interested in how AI is impacting customer service. How are you using AI in your contact center and how will it affect this role? Whoa, what a great question. If I was asked that question as the interviewer, I would be impressed. I would be impressed by this candidate. So the questions that you ask give you a great opportunity to stand out as a candidate. All right, what was the next question that came through? I find one-on-one interviews to be fine, but I find panel interviews to be very uncomfortable. How do I handle panel interviews? Okay, so yes, panel interviews can be really uncomfortable. For those of you who are wondering, a panel is where you're being interviewed, let's say often by 3 or 4 people, and they're normally sitting in a straight table across the room, and you're being interviewed by them. Tips with panel interviewing. With panel interviewing, it's really important to speak to whoever asks the question. So if person number 1 asks the question, you speak your answer to person number 1. You don't just only look at person number 1, you might look at number 2 and number 3 and number 4, but you keep coming back to person number 1 and speaking to those. Hopefully each person on the panel will ask a question, but there'll normally be a lead. But so you answer your question to the person that asks it, but you take some time to acknowledge as your head moves each person. Like every interview, it is absolutely key that you look people in the eye, probably more so with panel interviews because, you've got to divide up your attention, and looking people in the eye might feel uncomfortable for a lot of candidates, but it is really, really important to do so. That's my main tip. My second tip for panel interviews is it is far more difficult to build rapport. It is more difficult to build rapport with a group of 4 strangers than it is with one stranger. And so don't be surprised if the interview feels a little bit cold. Don't be surprised if you're sitting there after 5 minutes going, I don't feel this is going very well. It's very formal. Panel interviews are more formal. It is going to feel more formal. So I want you to feel that if it is feeling formal, that's okay. That's how it's supposed to be. And that's where a lot of candidates panic. They're like, oh, this is feeling really formal. I'm probably not doing well. No, just take a breath, relax, concentrate on answering the question and speaking predominantly to the person who asked it. At what part of the recruitment process is it okay to negotiate salary? Can I do so at the first interview? All right, salary negotiations is a huge topic. The first question you need to ask yourself before negotiating any salary is this salary negotiable? What do I mean by that? Well, if you're applying for, say, a government organization, the salary is not negotiable. It's already set. If you're applying for an organization that have clearly stated they pay award wages, the salary is not negotiable. It's already set. If you're applying for another organization that might have, again, let's say call centers, they might have 400 customer service agents, that salary is set. All 400 of those agents are likely on the same salary. So if you try to negotiate a salary change, normally a salary increase, on a salary that is set, you're going to look foolish and you're just going to annoy the interviewer. So you need to work out, question number 1, is this salary negotiable? If the salary is negotiable, you need to have a very clear, articulated reason why you are asking for a higher salary. So let's say you're interested in a job and they have advertised the role at $60,000. The point of salary negotiation for you needs to come towards the end of the process. So certainly not early on in the first interview. In fact, if there's going to be 2 interviews, I'd say not in the first interview at all. The reason being is you want to have impressed them as much as possible before you ask for a higher salary. But you also need to consider, is the salary on offer fair and reasonable? What do other jobs offer? Have a look on Seek. If all the other jobs offer 60,000 and you want to ask for 70, you're going to be up against it. But you need to show why. Why are you going to be worth $10,000 more than what the employer is wanting to pay? And you can't just say because I'm good at my job. You can't just say because I want more money or I've got costs. That's not the employer's responsibility. You need to show why you're above and beyond great for this role. So if it's a sales role, for example, you need to show that you've got exceptional sales skills and you've got exceptional sales results. If it's a payroll position, you need to show that you've got excellent qualifications that are above and beyond. So you need to show that you're above and beyond the qualifications. All right, and our final question for today's workshop is, how do I know? And it's a flow on from our salary question. How do I know if a job offer is actually a good deal? So I want you to go back and jump on your Candidate Coach platform. We've got a couple of early episodes on, creating a framework for yourself. We use a pyramid on the key things for you that are important in your next job. So you need to have your own key selection criteria. What is important to me as the job seeker? What am I looking for? It's going to include salary. Yes, absolutely. It's going to probably include the type of work, the location, the flexibility. So you need to weigh up all of those things. What I would encourage you to do, though, is not to get lost in the money. I've seen many candidates find their dream job at their preferred company and they're desperate and they're wanting $70,000 and the employer offers them $68,000 and they turn it down. They turn down the dream job at their dream company because they were so hell-bent on getting to $70,000. And so for the sake of $2,000 before tax, they turn it down and they always regret it a month or two later. So Salary is important. Don't get me wrong. I'm not working for free. You're not working for free, but you've got to look at the whole picture. That's the end of today's workshop. Just a reminder to jump on our Candidate Coach platform. Reach out to me directly if you don't have any access to that, and I'll provide it to you. Good luck with your job hunting. It was great to see you today.